She never imagined her life would turn into a story worth telling, yet every day as a single mom carried with it lessons of resilience, sacrifice, and unexpected moments of grace that gave her strength to keep moving forward. She had always dreamed of a family filled with laughter, stability, and love, but circumstances had painted a different picture, one where she stood alone with the responsibility of raising her child. People often underestimated what it meant to carry the title of a single mom. They thought it was just about feeding a child, paying bills, and showing up every day. But in reality, it was about living with a constant blend of fear and hope, of worry and joy, of exhaustion and pride. The mornings always came too quickly, with alarms buzzing before dawn, lunches to be packed, clothes to be ironed, and a little hand tugging at her sleeve, asking innocent questions about the day ahead. She would force a smile even when her body ached from lack of sleep, and she would whisper encouragement to her child, reminding herself that love was stronger than the tiredness in her bones at work. She often felt the stares and silent judgments of colleagues who wondered how she managed. Some pitied her, others admired her, but very few understood what it was like to clock in while worrying if she could make rent that month. She learned to stretch every dollar, to mend shoes instead of replacing them, to find joy in the little things like homemade meals and park picnics. Nights were the hardest when her child was asleep and the silence of the house pressed in, reminding her of dreams deferred and the absence of someone to share the weight with. Yet in those quiet hours, she would sit by the window with a notebook, writing down goals and affirmations, reminding herself that her story was not one of defeat, but one of perseverance. She had moments of doubt, moments where she wondered if love was meant for her anymore. Every heartbreak from the past replayed in her mind, the promises broken, the trust shattered, the loneliness magnified. But her child's smile always brought her back. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about building a future where her child felt secure, loved, and proud. That became her mission, and it gave her strength she didn't know she had. And then one day, when she wasn't looking for it, life surprised her. She met someone who saw her not as a burden, but as a complete person. Someone whose struggles had carved depth into her soul. It was at a simple place, not a glamorous event or a carefully planned meeting, but in the everyday setting of a restaurant where she tried to hide her struggles and shield her child from disappointment. She had only ordered water that evening because money was tight, and she couldn't let her child see her desperation. She smiled to cover the truth, but her eyes carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. That was the moment he noticed her, not as a charity case, not as someone beneath him, but as a woman of quiet strength. He was a man who had everything material one could ask for, wealth, power, recognition, yet he carried a loneliness that no success could fill. In her presence, he found something money could never buy: authenticity. Their worlds could not have been more different, yet both shared the same human longing for connection and love. She was cautious, guarded, unwilling to trust easily after being let down before. He was hesitant too, unsure if revealing who he truly was would make her turn away. But as they spent time together, conversations flowed and walls began to crumble. She spoke about her hardships openly, not for sympathy, but because it was her reality, and he admired her courage to keep standing tall when life had tried to break her. There were challenges that tested them both. Her insecurity about stepping into a world she felt she didn't belong in, his fear of being valued only for his wealth, the judgments of outsiders who couldn't understand how such different paths could cross. Yet, through it all, they discovered that love wasn't about status or circumstance, but about choosing each other every single day despite the storms. For her, love became a second chance, proof that she was more than the labels life had attached to her. For him, love became redemption, proof that even in the coldest loneliness, warmth could be found in the most unexpected place. Their bond grew stronger, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, forged in honesty, sacrifice, and the shared desire to build something lasting. She continued being the devoted mother she always was, but now she had a partner who stood beside her, not to take over her role, but to share the load. He didn't try to erase her past or change her into someone she wasn't. He simply loved her as she was, with all her flaws and scars. In return, she gave him what his fortune never could: genuine affection, laughter, and a home that wasn't defined by walls or wealth, but by warmth and belonging. Together, they showed that love stories aren't always born from fairy tales or perfect beginnings. Sometimes they rise from broken places, from quiet dinners of water and sacrifice, from the resilience of a mother and the humility of a man willing to open his heart. And in that journey, they discovered a truth far greater than riches or success. The truth that love in its purest form heals, uplifts, and transforms even the most weary soul. He feared that the truth about his wealth would scare her away or change the way she looked at him. The day he finally revealed who he truly was became a turning point. Anna felt a storm of emotions, betrayal, disbelief, and fear colliding in her heart. To her, it seemed impossible that a man of his stature could truly want someone like her, a woman burdened with struggles, debts, and the constant demands of motherhood. She questioned his sincerity, wondering if she was merely another project in his life, another challenge to conquer. He had to prove, not through words, but through consistent actions, that what he felt for her was real. He showed up for her son's school events, offered his time rather than his wallet, and supported her in ways that respected her independence. Slowly, her walls began to lower and she allowed herself to see him not as a millionaire CEO, but as a man who was lonely and searching for love. Just like her, their romance became a delicate balance of two worlds colliding, her modest existence meeting his world of wealth and influence. Outsiders whispered, some doubting her intentions, others questioning his choices, but they learned to shut out the noise. In each other, they found refuge from the expectations and the pressures of the world. He cherished the grounding simplicity she brought into his life, while she discovered that love could still bloom even after heartbreak. Together, they built something not defined by wealth or circumstance, but by mutual respect, trust, and the desire to walk side by side. His empire gave him power, but it was their love that finally gave him peace. Her struggles had once made her feel small, but with him, she realized that her strength and authenticity were worth more than gold. And in that balance, they found a romance that was not about rescuing or being rescued, but about two hearts finally finding the home they had always longed for. Life has a way of testing the limits of the human spirit, breaking people down to their rawest form. And yet it also has the power to build them back up in ways they never imagined possible. For Anna, every day was a battle between despair and determination. She woke up before dawn, her body aching from the long shifts she endured, but her heart steady with a single purpose: to give her son the life he deserved. She often told herself that it didn't matter how heavy her burdens were as long as he had a smile on his face, but in truth, she carried loneliness, exhaustion, and worry like a shadow that never left her side. There were nights when she sat quietly in her small apartment after putting her boy to bed, staring at overdue bills and whispering promises to herself that she would find a way through, even when no way seemed visible. Those were the moments where she drew on reserves of strength she didn't know she had, reminding herself that love was her anchor. Michael's world looked nothing like hers. He was surrounded by towering glass buildings, polished conference rooms, and the relentless pursuit of success. He had wealth that others envied, a reputation that inspired respect, and a lifestyle many dreamed of. But none of it filled the empty spaces inside him. For all his victories, he lived with a gnawing loneliness that no amount of luxury could silence. He had grown tired of shallow conversations and people who only saw him as a means to an end. He longed for something real, a connection that stripped away titles and fortune and touched the heart directly. What he craved was not admiration, but authenticity, not adoration, but love. It was ironic that the man who had everything others desired felt poorer than anyone. When it came to matters of the heart, their worlds collided in the most unexpected way. On a night that seemed ordinary at first glance, but turned into the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. Bueno. She had taken her son out, determined to give him the joy of being in a place where other families laughed and shared meals, even if all she could afford was water for the two of them. She masked her struggles with a smile, not wanting her boy to notice the weight she carried. He, on the other hand, had just endured yet another failed attempt at finding companionship, another blind date that left him feeling invisible despite his status. As he walked past her table, something about the tired yet tender look in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't pity that drew him in, but the undeniable strength wrapped in her simplicity. The conversation that started that evening planted a seed. He offered her kindness, not out of obligation, but because he recognized in her something he had been searching for: honesty without agenda. She hesitated, cautious of his intentions, scarred by past betrayals and broken promises. Trust was not something she could hand out easily. Yet as time unfolded, she realized that his gestures weren't empty. His presence wasn't fleeting. He listened to her stories without judgment, celebrated her small victories, and admired her courage to keep fighting even when life gave her little in return. He didn't see her as someone broken or in need of saving, but as a woman whose strength shone brighter than her circumstances. The challenges they faced were not small. She struggled with believing she was worthy of love again, haunted by fears that she was simply a burden. He wrestled with the fear that once she knew who he truly was, she would treat him differently, seeing the millionaire rather than the man. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments where the gap between their worlds seemed too wide to cross. But what set their story apart was their refusal to give up on each other. They discovered that true love wasn't about perfection, but persistence, not about easy paths, but about walking through the storms together. For Anna, the inspiration lay in realizing that her past did not define her future. She was more than the mistakes she had endured, more than the hardships she had faced. Through his unwavering belief in her, she began to believe in herself again, daring to dream of a life where she could thrive, not just survive. For Michael, the inspiration came from witnessing the power of resilience up close. He had built companies, expanded empires, but he had never seen a strength as profound as the one that lived in her quiet determination to keep going for the sake of her child. She reminded him of what truly mattered, that success meant nothing without love, compassion, and a heart willing to give together. They created a bond that inspired not only themselves, but those around them. Their story became proof that love can be found in the most unlikely places, that two people from entirely different walks of life can build something beautiful if they meet each other with honesty and vulnerability. Their journey wasn't about rescuing one another, but about lifting each other higher, filling the empty spaces with hope, laughter, and the promise of brighter days. It showed that even in the face of struggle, even when the odds feel stacked against you, love has the power to heal, transform, and give new meaning to life. And that kind of story isn't just a romance. It's an inspiration, a reminder that no matter where you come from or what you've been through, there is always the possibility of finding someone who sees the best in you and walks beside you through every trial and triumph.